I thought I was in heaven the day I sold my house. On the morning of my wedding, I lived through hell. Marcus said, "Hello, I'm Adam, your retired friend in Southeast Asia." One day I was sitting in a small cafe in Bangkok. That's where I met Marcus. He told me his story there. He was a 62-year-old German, a retired teacher. Marcus had taught for 35 years. He wanted a new life in Thailand. He sold his apartment in Frankfurt and lost all his money. 200,000 euros were gone. If you're ready, let's move on to the story. Let's hear it in Marcus's own words. My name is Marcus Hoffman. I'm 62 years old. I taught mathematics for 35 years. I was living in Frankfurt. Then I met a girl named Ploy, and my life turned upside down. My retirement plan was simple. I would sell my apartment in Frankfurt. I would live in a cheap country by the sea. At first I thought about Portugal. Then I discovered Thailand. It was much cheaper and more attractive. I wasn't married, and I didn't have any children. I worked at the same high school for years. I taught mathematics. My salary was good. My apartment belonged to me, and I had no debt. Everything in my life was fine, except for the extreme monotony. I was living the same routine every day, and I had lost my excitement for life. I had never married. I only focused on my work. My apartment in Frankfurt was worth around 400,000 euros. My pension was about 3,000 euros a month. In Thailand, I could live like a king. In Germany, the weather was cold, and the loneliness was unbearable. The decision process took 8 months. In the end, I said, okay. First, I planned a 3-week vacation. Bangkok, Pattaya, Chiang Mai. I wanted to get to know the country. It was February of 2019. It was snowing in Frankfurt. I packed my suitcase. But the real shock was this. The moment I set foot in Bangkok, I felt 20 years younger. Then everything started to change. I left the airport. It was hot and humid. I took a taxi to the hotel. During the first week I traveled like a tourist. But in the evenings I was alone again. I was sitting by myself at the hotel bar. I watched other tourists talking to young Thai girls. How was I supposed to approach a woman I didn't know? I watched them from a distance. I kept asking myself, Marcus, what are you doing here? I was lonely in Frankfurt, and lonely here too. Maybe this plan was a mistake. On the evening of the 8th day there was a turning point. I found a small restaurant on Silom Road. I ordered tom yum goong soup and pad thai. I like spicy food. I said, spicy please. The waitress kept coming to my table. She kept asking, everything okay, sir? She was always smiling. Her face would light up. She had long black hair. She was wearing a name tag on her chest. I learned that her name was Ploy. She was 28 years old. She had come to Bangkok to work. She was originally from a village in Udon Thani. She asked, you from Germany? I said, yes, Frankfurt. She said, oh, very far, and laughed. When she asked, you eat alone always? I felt embarrassed. I said, yes, I'm tourist. I travel alone. She looked at me with pity. She asked, why alone? No wife? That question hurt. I said, no wife, no children. She said, you lonely man, and looked sad. She finished work at 9:30. She was speaking Thai with the other staff in the kitchen. Then she came over to me. She asked, you want drink coffee with me? I said, yes, I would like that. For the first time a Thai woman was interested in me. We went to a nearby bar. It was around 10 p.m. Ploy's English was basic, but we could understand each other. She told me about her family in detail. Her mother was a housewife. Her father was a farmer. She had a 16-year-old brother named Naran. She said life in the village was very hard. Electricity was often cut off. They were struggling a lot. Life in Bangkok was hard for Ploy as well. She earned 15,000 baht a month. The room rent was 1,500 baht per person, and with expenses it went higher. She sent all the extra money to her family. 3 girls lived in a small room together. The bathroom was shared. The conditions were very bad. I told her my own story too. 35 years of teaching mathematics. The same school for years. The same classes. She was very surprised. She said, "You very smart man." Her smile looked very sincere. She had a natural beauty. The next day we met again. Before she went to work, we went to Wada room. It means Temple of Dawn. It was by the river. The view was amazing. I held her hand on the stairs. My heart started beating faster. Our third meeting was more special. We took a boat tour on the Chao Phraya River. We rowed a traditional longtail boat. There were temples and traditional Thai houses along the river. During the boat tour, Ploy sat next to me. She looked very beautiful. I felt young. When she said, "You handsome man, Marcus," I was shocked. At 62, a woman was calling me handsome for the first time. I asked, "Really?" She said, "Yes, you have kind eyes. You smart man. You good man." That evening after she finished work, we went to Lumpini Park. The park was about to close, and we started walking. We sat on a bench. Ploy was so close she could hear my heartbeat. Suddenly she turned to me. She looked into my eyes. She said, "Marcus, I falling love you." Her voice was trembling. She sounded sincere. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this really happening? Was this young and beautiful girl telling me she loved me? I told her I loved her too. We smiled. We were both emotional. That night we kissed for the first time. It was a very sweet kiss. Very gentle. At 62, I felt real love for the first time. Ploy's hand was in mine. I was happy. At this point, Marcus was completely carried away. He was under the spell of love. He had lost the ability to think clearly. But he still hadn't seen what Ploy's real plans were. This was exactly the moment when everything began to change. I spent the remaining 9 days with her. She had taken time off work. She took me everywhere. We went to the floating market. We visited old temples. In the evenings I would drop her off where she stayed. The room was very small. There were only narrow beds and a small wardrobe. I wanted to help her. On our last night, we talked. It was our last night. Ploy was very emotional. She held my hands. She said, "Marcus, I want marry you. We live my village, build big house together." I was surprised. I would have to sell my house in Frankfurt. Ploy was excited. She said, "You sell house Germany. We build better house Thailand." I returned to Frankfurt. We talked every day on WhatsApp. The plan felt perfect. I had an apartment worth 400,000 euros. With that money we could build a palace on a huge piece of land in Thailand. She sent photos from the village. It looked green and peaceful. But I had small doubts. Was marriage supposed to happen this fast? I tried to make video calls. She always made excuses. She said, "My phone camera no work." At the end of May, I spoke with a real estate agent. We had the apartment evaluated. The selling process started. Then I got a call. Ploy was crying. She said, "Marcus, big problem. My father borrow money." She said, "Bad people village want money. 500,000 baht. They hurt him." She sent a video. There were 3 men in the village. They were talking to her father. They looked tense. 500,000 baht was close to 15,000 euros. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was this a real crisis? Or was it a game? Ploy's crying felt real. The video felt real. But the real shock came the following week. I called a friend who worked at a bank. The apartment wasn't sold yet. But I could use it as collateral. I could take a loan of 50,000 euros. I explained everything to Ploy. She shouted happily, "You saved my father. You hero." Her voice sounded very grateful. I sent the money through Western Union. Exactly 13,500 euros. But after I sent the money, there were things I would learn. What happened a week later was unexpected. After I sent the money, Ploy started to change. Her behavior became cold. Before, she used to send 15 messages a day. Now I was getting only 2 or 3 messages. I wanted to make video calls. She kept making excuses. In September, my apartment was sold. 375,000 euros. I was completely closing my life in Frankfurt. This time, Chloe seemed happy. She kept saying, "Now we happy forever." I bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok. Right before flying to Bangkok, I did some research. I read forums. Story after story about scams. An old teacher friend of mine, who had been to Thailand before, warned me. He said, "Marcus, be careful. The same thing happened to me." I ignored what I read. I didn't listen to my friend. What I read shook me deeply. Was I living a similar story myself? The apartment was sold. The plane ticket was bought. I typed Thailand marriage scams into Google. Hundreds of stories came up. Building a house in the village. Family debts, emergency situations. Always the same scenarios. My heart was racing. Had I fallen into this trap too? On October 12, 2019, I arrived at Bangkok airport. Chloe was there to meet me. She was with a man I didn't know. He was in his 30s. She said, "This my brother Somchai." There was something strange about his behavior. I was surprised. She had never mentioned him before. Somchai looked at me coldly. He didn't even want to shake my hand. He and Chloe kept speaking Thai. We went to a hotel in Bangkok together. Somchai was always with us. He didn't leave us alone for even a minute. Chloe didn't seem very happy to see me. Her behavior was distant. I thought maybe she was afraid of her brother. When we got to the room, Chloe explained the situation to me. She said, "My brother come because father problem more big now." She said the loan sharks had added interest to her father's debt. They had paid the 500,000 baht I had sent, but it wasn't enough. Now the debt was 750,000 baht. She said, "Bad men say they break father leg if no money." While telling me this, she looked very scared. She said, "Somchai come take money, father." What could I do? The father of the woman I loved was in danger. I took money from the account I had set aside for the house and the wedding. I gave it to the so-called brother. As soon as Somchai took the money, he said, "I go village now." That night he went back to the village. After Somchai left, Chloe and I were finally alone. I thought we would continue our relationship from where we left off. I thought we would relive those emotional moments filled with love. But she kept saying, "I go work restaurant." She was working every day. She spent very little time with me. Every evening I waited for her to finish work. I wanted to start making wedding plans. I asked her to take a break from work and spend time with me. When I asked, "When we go village meet family?" she kept saying, "Soon." Father still sick. I had already started doubting her. 2 weeks later we finally went to the village. I met Chloe's family. Her father looked very weak. He shook my hand. He didn't speak English. He said something in Thai. Chloe told me he said, "Thank you, saved my life." Her mother was also very kind. She cooked food. They seemed very happy to see me. But the villagers were looking at me strangely. It felt like they were smiling under their breath. Somchai was also behaving very harshly. He kept frowning. He wasn't warm toward me at all. But I trusted how kind the mother and father were. I pushed my doubts aside. Days were passing. I started pressuring Chloe about the wedding plans. She told me that getting married without having a house was against their traditions. So I said, "Then let's build the house now." A few more weeks passed. They took me to see the land where we would build the house. It was a beautiful place. It was by the river. Chloe said, "This land perfect for house." We talked to the landowner. He wanted 40,000 euros for a 1,500 square meter villa plot. I agreed to pay. Then the infrastructure costs appeared. New ones kept coming up. Every time I was paying large amounts. Chloe kept saying, "No worry, Marcus. This finish. No more money." But the expenses never ended. Within 3 months I spent another 50,000 euros. I started asking about the wedding date. I said, when we marry, Ploy. She kept giving vague answers. She said, first finish house. Then we marry. But the house never seemed to be finished. New problems kept appearing. The money was almost gone. One day, while walking around the village, a neighbor woman saw me. She asked, you Ploy husband friend? I said, no. I Ploy boyfriend. The woman looked shocked. She said, no, Ploy husband Sumchai. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe it. That evening I asked Ploy, Sumchai your husband? Her face turned pale. She started sweating. She said, Marcus, I can explain. At that moment, I understood. What I had heard was true. They had been married for 3 years. For them I was only a source of money. My world collapsed. I couldn't breathe. The next morning I packed my suitcase. I returned to Bangkok. From there I flew back to Germany. I left 150,000 euros behind. The house, the land, the borrowed money. Everything was gone. At 63 I was back in Germany again. I no longer had a home. I no longer had money in the bank. I found a small rented studio that my pension could afford. I was in an unbelievable state of disappointment. I was no longer just lonely. I felt stupid too. She had never loved me at all. Now that I have to pay rent, I struggle to get by. When I think about it now, I wish I had insisted on video calls. I wish I had visited the village earlier. I wish I hadn't rushed things. I wish. But now, it's too late. And friends, this is where Marcus's painful story ends. The lessons from this story are actually very clear for all of us. Be suspicious of those who avoid video calls. Stay away from people who constantly ask for money. Love can blind you, but your mind must always stay alert. These stories are real. If you ever face a similar situation, remember these warnings. Greetings to all of you from Southeast Asia.